Of the whole thing, okay? I'm holding by Simchas Torah. It says in Simchas Torah, in the group that I just spoke to, teachers training, I did Hakafos by the Rebbe. I'm just going to tell you a word on Hakafos. I don't want to steal Hakafos from you completely, but I'm going to move on to other things. Hakafos by the Rebbe was divided up into two basic parts. When the Rebbe danced himself, and when the Rebbe encouraged the singing. When the Rebbe danced himself, he went to the middle of the shul. When the Rebbe encouraged the singing, he stayed in the front in his place. The best way to describe Hakafos is controlled energy. Hakafos were very happy. They were very happy. But they were not crazy. I mean, they were not drunk. One drunk could ruin Hakafos for a whole shul. Because unless you're a Chassidish drunk, the drunkenness makes you have no control. If no control, you disrupt. He wasn't drunk. He was very energetic and very happy, but very controlled. The Rebbe ran the show like a taskmaster, like a captain of a ship. The Rebbe had a little watch on his shender, which he was always looking at. And Hakafos went the way he wanted it. There was the first Hakafos and the last Hakafos, which the Rebbe danced himself. In Mem Aleph, when the Rebbe made Sivas Hashem, the Rebbe went also the fifth Hakafos, he danced with the children. And all the other Hakafos, the Rebbe stood in the front, and he managed the Hakafos from the front. And the Hakafos would start when the Rebbe turned around to face the crowd, we would sing. And the Hakafos finished when the Rebbe turned to face the wall. How much time did a Hakafos take? So first of all, the Rebbe's personal Hakafos, when the Rashag was there, when the Rebbe danced with his brother-in-law, they would put their right hand on each other's shoulders, they would hold the Sefer Torah in their left hand, and they would dance, and Rashag would look at the ceiling. So the Rashag would get dizzy. The Rebbe's Hakafos, when I was a kid, were the shortest Hakafos. When the Rashag got sick, and he stopped coming to Hakafos, or he missed Hakafos, the Rebbe danced alone. And when the Rebbe danced alone, the Rebbe's Hakafos went from being the shortest Hakafos to being the longest Hakafos. And the middle Hakafos were, some were short, some were long. I tell the girls, I remember they were turning around by Hakafos and just looking. He wasn't even clapping, looking. 2 minutes, 3 minutes, mamish, offen Zegel, 200 seconds. And turning around, Hakafos finished. Next, it moved. Shmini Atzeres by night, they daven Ma'ariv around 7 o'clock. Right? This year it's a little bit earlier because the Rebbe it's a little late. 7, 10, 7:15, and after Ma'ariv they would announce that there's a break for a Kiddush. People went to shul to make Kiddush. Remember, the Shmini Atzeres, they're still sitting in the sukkah. The Rebbe came into Hakafos 8:30. By 10:15 it was over. In my years, it was over. Done. The shul, people went to sleep. You didn't dance Shmini Atzeres at night. Simchas Torah at night, after Hakafos, people would dance. By 10:30 the show was over. Shmini Atzeres was probably the most boring day in Sukkot, especially after Simchas Breishis started, because Shmini Atzeres was the only night of Sukkot that you actually slept the whole night in a bed. 10 o'clock was Shacharis, the shul was usually quite empty, and the Rebbe said the Haftarah of Shmini Atzeres, and that was it. The feature of Shmini Atzeres was the Talucha. The boys used to go out in the afternoon to be Sameach in different neighborhoods. They went to Manhattan, they went to different places in Brooklyn, they went as far as the water, Brighton Beach. Some guys went to Queens, these long walks. And by the Rebbe, they say there was as follows: Simchas Torah at night, I was never there. If anybody was by the Rebbe's Ma'ariv, Simchas Torah at night, he'd be embarrassed to admit it, because Simchas Torah at night was meant for old people who couldn't walk, you understand? We all went to shuls to Sameach Yidden. There was no one by the Rebbe's Ma'ariv. Simchas Torah at night, by Ma'ariv, was very empty. It was a regular time, 7:30, Ma'ariv. They didn't finish. They would say Til Aleinu, and then they would say there's going to be a break. 9 o'clock at night, Simchas Torah, there was a Farbrengen. It was in the shul. The Rebbe came in at 9 o'clock, and you have to remember, they prepared the shul, Simchas Torah, for Hakafos by taking every single bench out of the whole building. There was not a bench in the shul. Everything was outside. The only thing they had in the shul was these steel tables that were shaped as a long noose going from the front of the shul to the middle of the shul, 2 long tables, and the Rebbe would pass between. That was called a shvil. And in the center of the shul there was a rectangle of tables, a square rectangle of tables called a ches. So now make a Farbrengen. There's no benches in shul, and there's these tables which are interfering. So when you walked into the Farbrengen of Hakafos Simchas Torah, it looked normal, but there was nothing normal about it. It was very hard to put benches in. The benches were missing. People literally sat on their own feet. They brought some benches in as much as they could, but it was very makeshift because the steel tables could not be moved. And when the Rebbe came into the Farbrengen, Simchas Torah, the shul was quite empty. It was not that many people. Again, I was never there, never. Even when I was on Shlichus and I permitted myself to go to a nearby shul, I didn't come to the beginning of the Farbrengen, I came to the middle of the Farbrengen. So there's something which I never witnessed, which I would find very curious. The Rebbe made Kiddush. Now understand that the Rebbe made Kiddush every Shabbos. But Kiddush by day is not really Kiddush, right? Kiddush by day is Be'er Priyagofen and Psukim. So when the Rebbe made Kiddush by Farbrengen, he remained sitting. And he just raised himself out of his seat a little bit, which is why in many of your homes, there's a whole controversy. Kiddush Shabbos day, you stand or you sit? The Rebbe sat. But Kiddush at night is real Kiddush. You make a bracha, shekeh d'shanim es veitz v'tzivonu, asher b'chabonim kol ha'amim. So the Rebbe stood. I'm assuming the Rebbe got up for Kiddush. I was never there, but in my imagination, the Rebbe got up. So the Rebbe stood up, the whole room got up. And the Rebbe made Kiddush, and he made a shechayanu. As you do Shmini Simchas, he sat down, and he drank the wine, and he ate cake. And the Farbrengen would start. The Farbrengen went from 9 till about 12, maybe 12:30. And as the Farbrengen would go on, the Bocharim and the Balabatim would come back from their shuls, and the shul would fill up slowly. And everybody came into the shul, you tried to go to your place, your regular place. It was pushing, but I came to many of those Farbrengen towards the end. The Farbrengen of Leil Simchas Torah was very memorable. A lot of very special things, special moments. Now, there were things, b'chlal by the Rebbe, everything is memorable. The Rebbe's Hanhoge is such an incredible hybrid of things never changing and there always being something new. It's very hard to explain. The Rebbe was so consistent and was so unpredictable at the same time. Those statements are both absolute truths. The Rebbe was incredibly consistent. Every day he was in shul the same time. Mincha was 3:15. Ma'ariv was 6:45 or 9:30. He was so consistent. And on the other hand, there was always something different. And these Farbrengen of Leil Simchas Torah were occasions where more than once or twice the Rebbe would say something or do something which is very memorable, very memorable. The one time I allowed myself to stay by the whole Simchas Torah Farbrengen, I was in Shlichus. So I wasn't here a whole year. So I went to a closed shul, went to Michal shul. I finished Hakafos probably 9:15. I ran back to 7:70. I got there near the beginning of the Farbrengen. I was there for almost the whole Farbrengen. And the Rebbe spoke Yemel Desiche of Yasher Kecha Sheshibarta, the last Rashi in Chumash. How Moshe Rabbeinu broke the Torah. And when Moshe Rabbeinu broke the Torah, he didn't know Hashem was going to give him another one. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't consult anybody. He saw that Yidden were in Sakona. The Eibush was angry Yidden by the Egel. What's the last Rashi in Chumash? Nesoi Libe Shel Moshe Lishber Asaluchas. V'eskima Kadosh Baruch Hu l'daitei Moshe Kosov Asher Shibarta Asher Keich Asher Shibarta. Moshe Rabbeinu's heart was uplifted to break the luches, and the Eibush agreed with him, and Hashem told him thank you. What was the thank you? But the Rebbe shouted with a lot of emotion. It's a brach in the Torah. Moshe broke the Torah, and he didn't know there was going to be another one. Why? To save the Jewish people. And that sicha rings in my head. It's a very memorable moment. It's in Likutei Sichos also, but the emotion and the intent that the Rebbe invested in that sicha, you can't put in a printed page. It's here. It's very, very difficult to duplicate. But this is just an example. It's Simchas Torah at night. There was usually things happen, special things. Farbrengen finished around 12:30, and the Rabbi would tell to the Gabbai to announce what's going to happen next. And the Gabbai would get up, and I think the Rebbe would even say it himself, and announce that now they have to get ready to shul for Hakafos. Everybody should go out, everyone go outside. And they prepared the shul for Hakafos. Nobody went outside. You went to your place. Now the benches which had been brought in for the Hakafos were carried out on people's heads. One of the great miracles, those benches were made of steel. They're still made, they're very heavy. And they would sort of fly out of the shul over people's heads. And when they got outside, there were a few Bocharim who were actually in charge, who would take the benches and move them. And somehow, 1 o'clock, the Rebbe walked into Hakafos, a half an hour after he left the shul. Everybody was in their place. and the Hakafos would start. They would walk through the long shul. And in my head, they always sang the same thing. That I walked through the whole shul, went up to this place, and he turned around, they started to clap and dance. Everyone would sort of jump up and down in his place. And that's how the Hakafos started. Simchas Torah night, Hakafos finished probably around 3:15. It was 2 hours. It was very controlled. The ability for the Rebbe to create so much joy and so much management of time it's very unusual. But he was really happy. When you finished with Hakafos, you were really uplifted. But the Rebbe was controlled. It was never hefker. It was never wild. And usually Simchas Torah night you stayed in shul and danced. I mean, depending on how much seichel you had. We stayed till we danced after the Rebbe left. The reason not to stay in shul is because one of the most memorable events of Simchas Torah was 10 o'clock in the morning. All the mothers with little kids could not get out of their house, but their husbands went to sleep late and they were still sleeping, so a lot of women would sneak out of the house at 9:30 in the morning and go to 770 for Chiddush. Simchas Torah morning. People who couldn't come to the whole Tishrei because they were busy feeding everybody, including the guests and their children, would sneak out of the house 9:30 when the whole house was asleep. And they'd go to 770 and they ever walked into the shul was pushed 3/4 empty. There was nobody there. Not nobody, but it was not full. And they say, I was never there, I'm embarrassed to admit, I was never there at 10 o'clock. Never. And if I had gone to sleep early, if I had seichel, I had friends who right after Hakafos, they went home. And we looked at them like, square bacharim, it's Simchas Torah. Their cheshbon was, I want to be in 10 o'clock in the morning. And it was a very good cheshbon. And the Rebbe would turn around, he's wearing his talis, and the joy in the beginning of davening to the half-empty room and to all the women whose only experienced Tishrei by the Rebbe was Simchas Torah morning. What I'm describing to you was actual. There were many, many ladies. This was their whole Tishrei. Simchas Torah morning, they were busy feeding everybody. Feeding their husbands, their children, their guests. So 9:30 in the morning, the women would sneak into 7:70, everyone was still asleep, and the Rebbe would really create an energy. That's how davening started. Simchas Torah morning in 7:70. And of course, as Shachas went on, the shul filled up. I mean, you never came too late, you didn't want to miss anything. One of the unusual features of Simchas Torah is, I mean, if you were a boy or men, I would ask you, but I'm not going to expect you to know this. One of the unusual features of Simchas Torah is that you duchen in Shachris. Birchas Kohanim is in Shachris, not in Musaf. The reason for this is, it gives the people who are sleeping a little time to get the Hakafos, a few more minutes. That's not the real reason, that's the 770 reason. The real reason is because a Kohen is not allowed to duchen when he's shikir. Right? You know the Pashas Yayin B'Sheikh Al Teish, the Pashas Shmini. That if you go into the Beis Shtuya Yayin Nichs Nadav and Avihu died, why? Because they went to the Beis HaMikdash when they were shikir. A Kohen is not allowed to duchen. Duchening is considered a Sheirus, it's considered a Avodah. So the duchening is by Shachar, so the Kohenim can say L'chaim. The din is Shulchan Aruch. So, Birchas Kohanim was by Shachris. And right after Shachris was a very unusual feature, a really unusual feature, which was out of character. You didn't usually see such a thing in 770. They would turn around and people make Kiddush. The Rebbe didn't make Kiddush, the Rebbe didn't eat, the Rebbe didn't drink, the Rebbe would not eat and drink standing up. But for about 10 minutes, the Olam would feast, and the Rebbe would watch. You know, there's not a lot of circumstances where the Rebbe was passive. You know, usually we observed, the Rebbe was active, we were watching the Rebbe. One of the few times where the Rebbe was the observer was Simchas Torah morning. It probably was 10 minutes. Now, most people didn't make Kiddush. They certainly didn't get shikir. Getting drunk in front of the Rebbe requires A, you're a very, very big chassid, B, you're a very, very big idiot, C, you're a very big chutzpahniak, or a combination thereof. You know, you drink in front of the Rebbe. But they were the regular drunks. There were people who every year Simchas Torah put on a show. And they were part of the ebb and flow, and the Rebbe would even acknowledge them. But the Rebbe people would make it. The people around the Rebbe would get a little wine, a kichlach, make a bracha, and say, and the Rebbe would say, and you would say to the Rebbe l'chaim, and l'chaim the bracha. I was far away, so I was never close enough to. I was not going to make Kiddush. I was not going to participate. But people, and the Rebbe used to watch people make Kiddush. There was a very interesting tziyud of the Rebbe watching people eat and drink in front of him, and he's enjoying it and answering l'chaim. So however that only took 10 minutes, it couldn't have taken that long. and then the Rebbe would turn to face the wall, and Hakafos would begin. Simchas Torah's Hakafos are very lopsided. Simchas Torah day. Because us, Meshuggah and radical Chabadnikis, do 3 atareses. Nobody does 3 atareses. Some people don't even do 3 atareses by night, but by day, 3 atareses. 3 atareses takes forever. Forever. Maybe an hour. 45 minutes for sure. Because you have to announce each pasuk who bought it. The first of the atareses, Simchas Torah, the Rebbe said every one of the 17 psukim. And people paid a lot of money. People paid thousands of dollars for one pasuk to Mechaber the Rebbe. So they would announce. The pasuk ataresa gekoivt so and so and so and so was mechabed Kiddush adinenu meirenu v'rabbeinu shlita, and then the Rebbe would say the pasuk, and then the next pasuk. The pasuk it took time. The pasuk Eisafai was taught by Shmerel and Chaim and Baruch and Moshe and Chaim and Yossi, and the mechabed Kiddush adinenu meirenu v'rabbeinu shlita. I think Zalman Garai made the announcements Simchas Torah day, but it could be wrong. And the Rebbe said all 17 psukim by night and by day. The first atares, the second and third atareses. The Rebbe said the first pasuk and the last pasuk. After each ataresa, the Rebbe would start a nigun and we would dance. After all 3 atareses were finished, then the Rebbe said ufaratzta v'hoya zaracha, and in Shnas Hakel, like this year, the Rebbe would also say 3 times the pasuk hineni mevi eschem eretz tzofen, and then we sang again. So ataresa took forever. Hakafos is one dance. It's not one hakafos, it's one dance. The minig Simchas Torah by day is that you take out all the svarim. You go to the middle of the shul, and you read the nusach of all 7 hakafos together. You know how hakafos looks, girls? How hakafos looks? There's big words, right? Ana Hashem Mashiachna, Ana Hashem Matzlichana, Ana Hashem Anenu V'Kenu, Elokei Eruchas Hashiachna, Be'echel Vatzlichana, Gil Chazek Anenu. That's the first hakafos. And then there's a bunch of small words, right? Then you have the second hakafos, right? David Sakas Hashiachna, Hadam Vatzlichana, Vasi V'Chazek, and a bunch of small words. So usually, by each hakafos, you take the Sefer Torah, you circle the bima and read the big words and the little words of that one hakafos, and the minig is you actually say with your mouth, Ad kan hakafos aleph, Ad kan hakafos beis, Ad kan hakafos gimel. Simchas Torah day, whoever gets hakafos takes a siddur, and he circles the bima 3.5 times, not 7 times, 3.5 times, and he reads all 7. So the Rebbe would hold the Sefer Torah in his right hand, the siddur in his left hand, and he would go behind Mashiach Sefer Torah. That was the lead Sefer Torah. Always went in front of the Rebbe, the Mashiach Sefer Torah. Sefer Torah, the Kabbalah, is named Mashiach. And the Chosson would say out loud, Ana Hashem Mashiachna, Ana Hashem Matzlichana, Keiruch Hashiachna, and then it would be quiet. They would stop, and they'd read all the small words, and then they would say Ad kan hakafos aleph. Then he would continue walking, and so on. And it took 3.5 revolutions. In other words, every hakafos got a half a hekef. Hakafos means a circle. If you have 3.5 circles, that means each hakafos gets a half. And they would read all the big words loud, and then they would stop walking, read the small words, say Ad kan hakafos beis, and you understand? That's how they did it. After all 7 hakafos, then the Rebbe would go to the middle of the shul and dance. There was only one dance. The Rebbe gave his siddur. The Rebbe had a siddur. He would give it to Leibel Bistritsky every year, Olav Shalom. And he would take it from the Rebbe, and if you were close enough, he'd let you kiss the Rebbe's siddur. And those are all little memories from 770. He would hold the siddur and let you kiss it. And the Rebbe danced. The dance Simchas Torah by day was very similar to the dance Simchas Torah by night. Most of the years of the Rebbe's Nesias, he danced with his brother-in-law, with the Rashag. And the hakafos was short, because the Rashag was looking at the ceiling. And in the years Rashag wasn't there, the Rebbe danced by himself, and the hakafos was considerably longer. After hakafos, they went in front of the shul, the Sfarim went back into Aron Kiddush, they closed the Aron Kiddush, and people sort of organized themselves, and then they reopened the Aron Kiddush for Kriyas HaTorah. Kriyas HaTorah is after hakafos. Now, I just want to say a statement. The Sefer Torah is the holiest thing we own. You understand that, right? In the lack of the Beis HaMikdash, we don't have an Aron HaKiddush, and we don't have a Luchas HaBris. The holiest thing we possess is the Sefer Torah. The Mittel Rebbe, the second Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Mittel Rebbe never took an aliyah. And the reason he gave was, Ich shem sich for Sefer Torah. The Mittel Rebbe, who was so holy, said, I'm embarrassed of the Sefer Torah. The Mittel Rebbe took one aliyah, Simchas Torah day, Im Kol HaNe'orim, the fifth, in many communities, the fifth aliyah, Chamishi, was given to the children. The Mittler Rebbe went with the kindlach to the Sefer Torah, and there used to be a minig, which we don't do anymore, that they would cover everybody with Sefer Torah inside Ayin Hora. The Sefer Torah is very holy. And in front of a Sefer Torah, you act with respect. When a Sefer Torah comes out, you stand. And a Sefer Torah you don't play around with. It's very disturbing to me when you see people treat a Sefer Torah casually. Even tefillin you're not allowed to treat casually. When you're holding a Sefer Torah, your faith should show fear. I'm holding literally the holiest thing the Jewish people possess is a Sefer Torah. And by the Rebbe, this was very clear. Not just when he held the Sefer Torah, but when he watched the maneuvering of the Sefer Torah. There's a lot of films when they took the Sefer Torah out of the Adam, but he would say Adam, turned around and looked, and when they would carry the Sefer Torah, they would watch the Sefer Torah the whole way till they put it down on the Bima Sakir. Then he would turn around. And when the Sefer Torah came back, he would look at the Sefer Torah, and you could see on the Rebbe's face an earnestness. Sefer Torah is holy. So the whole business of dancing with a Sefer Torah is a funny feature, and you only do it Simchas Torah. You don't dance with a Sefer Torah. Simchas Torah dance with a Sefer Torah. And you dance, and you express physically a joy with the Torah. It shows you how special Simchas Torah is, because the Simchas Torah, you're holding your Sefer Torah and you're comfortable dancing. You understand? That was Hakafos. When Kriyas HaTorah started, it was no longer Hakafos. When I danced with it, they were reading Sefer Torah. And I think there was a clear difference in the Rebbe's Pashat, his countenance. During Hakafos, dancing with the Sefer Torah was a Yid is comfortable to take this holy, holy artifact that we possess, that the Eibishter gave us, and not just hold it, but dance with it. But Kriyas HaTorah was a whole different mood. Now, Simchas Torah, you take out 3 Sefer Torah always. Right? There's other times of the year that you have 2 Sefer Torah. There's some times that you have 3. Shabbos Chanukah could be 3. Shabbos Shkolim could be 3. Shabbos HaChodesh could be 3. Simchas Torah is always 3 Svarim. Always 3 Svarim. Why? The first Sefer finishes the Chumash. The end of the Zeis HaBracha. It's called Chosson Torah. Finish the Torah. The second Sefer Torah opens the Sefer Torah again. It's called Chosson Breishis. Breishis Bara Lakim. And the third Sefer Torah is Maftir. The Rebbe got Chosson Breishis in the years that I remember. I read in the Rishimas that there were some years there were Chosson Torah. Chosson Torah means the person who closes the Sefer Torah. Chosson Breishis means the one who reopens it. So I read in the Rishimas that there were some years that the Rebbe took Chosson Torah, the end of the Sefer Torah, but in the years that I remember, which is from the time of my Bar Mitzvah approximately, the Rebbe always got Chosson Breishis. And people paid a lot of money. For Chosson Torah, paid a lot of money. People paid a lot of money for Chosson Torah. I think Rabbi Avram Parshan, alav hashalom, he was a chassid and a gvir. Emes a chassid and emes a gvir. I think he paid for Chosson Torah as long as he was alive. And after that, other people got it. Maftir, I think, was Kazanovsky's. But the Rebbe got Chosson Breishis. When the Rebbe went to Chosson Breishis, the mood in the room would change considerably. Simchas Torah suddenly became like Rosh Hashanah. It was very earnest. Why? This was the only time of the year that they called the Rebbe up by his name. They actually said his name. A whole year, when the Rebbe got in Aliyah, they would say, Ya'amoid Adineinu Mereinu V'Rebbeinu Ben Arav Rab Levi Yitzchak Mafta. You didn't say the Rebbe's name. Simchas Torah, the Gabbai would announce, Ya'amoid Adineinu, they'd say Harav Mem Ben Arav Rab Levi Yitzchak. You would actually say the Rebbe's name. In addition, this was an instruction from the Rebbe, by the way. The Rebbe got Aliyah together with the Frierdiker Rebbe. So they would call Adinei Numerenu Rebbeinu Harav and say the Frierdiker Rebbe's name. Ben Adinei Numerenu Rebbeinu Harav and say the Rebbe Rashab's name. Adinei Numerenu Rebbeinu Harav and say the Rebbe's name. Ben Arav Rebbe Yitzchak Chasnei Bereishis Bara. And if you're familiar with the Siddur, Simchas Torah, there's a whole nusach that's called Mirshus for the person who gets Chosson Breishis, Chosson Torah, the person who closes the Sefer Torah. And of course, at the end of Chosson Torah, everyone screams Chazak, Chazak, V'nis Chazek. You finish V'zei Sabrach, and V'nis Chazek. And there's a whole nusach Mirshus for the person who gets Chosson Breishis, who opens up the Sefer Torah. So you say each name 4 times. So it was very quiet in 770. It was very respectful. And you'll hear the Shusterman was in my years, was the one who did it. Years before was Rabbi Yechon and Gordon. Imdu, get up. Lashon Rab. Adinei, Nemanei Rabbeinu. They said the Frierdiker Rebbe's name. But Adinei, again and again, 4 times. And the mood in the room was very serious. The Rebbe went to that Hakafos, not Simchas Torah dik. It was Yom Kippur dik. Oyim. The Rebbe, for Rebbe, this is very real. The Rebbe said to call him up with the Rebbe the Shver. The Frierdiker Rebbe was always with the Rebbe. I mean, there's a famous story with the Rashag that was revealed a few years ago. That the Rebbe once told the Rebbe was dancing with his brother on the Hakafos. And the Rebbe said to his brother, you know that the Rebbe the Shver, the Frierdiker Rebbe is dancing with us. So the Rashag said, yeah, I know. The Rebbe said, you want to see? You want to see? And the Rashag said, yeah. And the Rashag saw. And he started to cry. Label Guru describes Rashag crying. Not only was he crying, the next morning he came into shul, he was still crying. The Rebbe told me, you want to see it? This is a maisa. I think it's true. The Rebbe said to the Rashag as they were dancing by Hakafos, the Rebbe the Shver tanzt mit uns. The Frierdiker Rebbe was there, and he said, yeah, and he saw him. It's pretty crazy. So the Rebbe saw the Frierdiker Rebbe all the time, but now he took an aliyah with the Rebbe the Shver. And you could feel the earnestness of it, the holy earnestness of it. Now, this is Pashat a technical thing. When the Frierdiker Rebbe got an aliyah, he did not hold the Eitz Chaims, the handles of the Sefer Torah, with his hand. He would hold the hand of the Sefer Torah with his talis. And as the Rebbe's brother-in-law always took an aliyah, he held it with a talis. The Rebbe, our Rebbe, held the Sefer Torah with his hands. He didn't hold it with a talis. Simchas Torah morning, since the Rebbe got an aliyah together with the Frierdiker Rebbe, so the Rebbe would take with the talis. And it was one of the things you wanted to see. And you had to be, most people didn't even know to look. You had to know that there was a shinoi. The Rebbe always held the Sefer Torah with his hands. You can see in many pictures. He's wearing a talis. He's holding his chaim with his hands. The Frierdiker Rebbe always held his chaim with a talis. Simchas Torah morning, because the Rebbe got aliyah with the Frierdiker Rebbe, if you had the right position and you knew to look, you would see, and I saw this more than once, the Rebbe would go to his aliyah holding the Sefer Torah with his talis. The Rebbe did Chosson Breishis, then he'd do Hag with Chosson Breishis, and then his Mafti, the third Sefer Torah. For most of the years that the Rebbe was to see us, Mafti Simchas Torah Chazanovsky, who was a very important, he probably has grandchildren in this room, or grandchildren's grandchildren in this room. He passed away around Mem Daled. After he passed away, they gave it to different people. So the Rebbe would stay for his aliyah, Chosson Breishis, Breishis Bar Lakim, the second Sefer Torah, for the Hagbe, and then for the Kriyas HaTorah of Maftir, and then he'd go back to his place before the person saying the Maftir would start to read. The last couple of years, they gave the Haftarah of Simchas Torah to Mendel Futafas, Olav Shalom. And the Rebbe stayed to listen. The Rebbe was standing next to Mendel Futafas was reading. One of his grandchildren told it to me, and then I talked about it. So he told me, my Zayda didn't read the Haftarah. The Rebbe was standing next to him. He's standing here, the Rebbe was standing right here. Listen to him read. He would cry. He finished crying, he made the brachas. How can you stand in front of it? Usually, when the person said the mafti, he went back to his place. The last 2 years, the Nalf and the Beis, they gave it to Mendel, and he stood there and listened to him say the mafti. Anyway, they went back to his place. They finished all the Sefer Torah, all the Kriya, all the Hagbis, and then you take the Sefer Torah back. When you take the Sefer Torah back, you say Sisu Visimchu. It's a whole page that you read. If you know how a Hakafos looks, you read a whole page. The whole page. I'm imagining that you know what I'm talking about. And if you don't, take out a siddur and look inside. After the 7 Hakafos, there's a few paragraphs that you read Simchas Torah morning after Kriyas HaTorah. Not after Hakafos, after Kriyas HaTorah. And then would turn around and would watch. And he would clap. In the later years, this changed, but for most of the years, it became very gingerly. And the way my father described it to me, and I'm sharing with you how I was raised, and it's not 100% true, but it was quite true, that as long as they were carrying the Sfarim, the Rebbe's clapping was very controlled. They're carrying 3 Sefer Torah, and it's not Hakafos anymore, you understand? It's not Hakafos. And they would clap, but very gingerly, until the Sfarim were put back into the Yonah. After the 3 Sfarim, when the other, then the clapping would start. The Simcha of Sisu Visimchu would begin after the Sfarim were put away. In the later years, it was different. And the truth is, I remember it was different. As soon as the Sfarim were put away, they turned around and said Musaf. But one of those memorable moments, I'll never forget. There's any Duchmans in the room? Any Duchmans here? Yisrael Duchman al Vashalom. Simchas Torah, he had a very special relationship with the Rebbe. Simchas Torah was his day. He davened Musaf. And it was usually, halachically, maybe not allowed to have a musaf. And he would carry the Sefer Torah. He'd go back, So one year he started singing, Harabi Shlita. You know that song, Harabi Shlita, Harabi Shlita? Harabi Shlita, from what I understand, it's a jingle from a commercial. It's an Israeli commercial. It's a jingle from a commercial. They put the Harabi Shlita. Now, is it appropriate to make a commercial, to take a jingle from a commercial, take a Coca-Cola commercial and make a niggin about the Rebbe? It wasn't made for the Rebbe. It was made for Freie kids in camp. For them it was gestimmt, you know. That niggin showed up in 770, that Tishrei. I think it was the year he passed away. I think it was Memtes. And Duchman is screaming, Harabi Shlita! And the whole shul was screaming, Shah! Why? It didn't seem appropriate. A commercial, not a Goyish song, a commercial from a television advertisement for, I don't know what, for pizza in Israel, now became a niggin, Harabi Shlita, and he's singing, and the whole shul screaming, Shah! Then he got the ha, you know the part, and the Rebbe starts to make with his hands. And that was the end of that. And the whole shul jumped. He sang the whole first part by himself. And the whole shul screaming, Shah, 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 Shah. And he's holding a Sefer Torah. Then he got to the punchline, and the Rebbe made it all about Chenigim. The Rebbe touched it, embraced it. Commercial. The Rebbe liked it. If you wanted the Rebbe to like a niggin, it was a very simple rule. Just make it happy. Sad, out the window. The Rebbe only wanted to the Chenigim. And Rebbe again and again and again. And it was such an interesting shift. Here he's singing and the whole shul is screaming chutzpah, and then now the Rebbe, in his chus, the Rebbe brought this niggin. Anyway, so the father went back into Aron Kiddush, and then was Musaf, and the Rebbe left the shul. Musaf, Simchas Torah probably finished 2:30, started 10 o'clock. Because Hakafos took a very long time, because Torah took a long time. And then it was a Farbrengen at night. The Rebbe davened minche, usually upstairs, sometimes they came downstairs. Simchas Torah in the afternoon, there was an occasion once where they went to shul upstairs to have a mincha, and he pushed it up on the bench, and he started to dance with the Eilim and sing. I wasn't there. I could have been there, but I wasn't there. There were a lot of very memorable things that happened in odd times and places. Simchas Torah was a special day by the Rebbe. Simchas Torah was the Rebbe's day. The feeling of Simchas Torah was complete openness. Come and take me, I'm available. Everybody, Simchas Torah by the Rebbe was incredibly disposed. That means he was so easy, and his mood was so good and so generous. I was a kid. I was a stupid kid. I probably was a Chassidish kid, but I didn't understand the Rebbe. I really didn't understand what it means, Rebbe. I still don't understand. Then I for sure didn't understand. But I knew that it was something, the Rebbe is not just another rabbi who sits in front of the shul. And one year, my father schlepped me with him, after Musaf, upstairs. The Rebbe came up the steps, and he was walking into his room, and there were a lot of people around. My father walked up to the Rebbe, put his face in the Rebbe's face, and said something. I don't know what he said, but my father was not a person that pushed himself into the Rebbe. I'm sure what he said was very important. But Simchas Torah was the kind of day that you could do that. You could walk up to the Rebbe and say something. And the Rebbe answered him. And I remember that what my father did, there was another man there who I know, who also went over to the Rebbe. Simchas Torah was a very, very special day. The Rebbe made a Farbrengen before the Shkia. The Rebbe came in, let's say the Shkia was, what's the Shkia now? Around 6:40, right? It's earlier than normal because it's a little bit later. So the Rebbe came in around 6:30, let's say, and they would wash. And after they would wash, the Gabbai would always get up and announce. In my yard it was Matel Talashevsky. In early years it was Alman Duchman. In later years it was Shia Pinson. I'm saying these names in case you're an uncle, you'll feel proud that your grandfather did something in 770. What else is the point of saying these names? He would get up and announce that the Rebbe gebeten, oisrufen, that if anybody didn't get washed, there's still a few minutes before the Shkia, you can go and wash. It was a Farbrengen. Farbrengen Simchas Torah was very long. I don't know, 4 or 5 hours. It could go till 11 o'clock. It started 6 till 11 o'clock, 5 hours, 12 o'clock. Long Farbrengen. Motzei Rosh Hashanah was much, much shorter. Motzei Simchas Torah was a much longer Farbrengen. There was a lot of Divrei Torah. A lot of Divrei Torah, a lot of Simcha, but a lot of Divrei Torah. One of the things that Rebbe always spoke about Simchas Torah was there was always a Kinnis Torah. After Simchas Torah, there was always a gathering of Rashi Yeshivas, and they would speak Kiddush Torah. And the Rebbe used to participate in the Kinnis Torah by speaking a Sicha in Nigla, Simchas Torah by the Farbrengen, that the Rabbi Yael Khan, would repeat the next day at the Kinnis. So the Simchas Torah Farbrengen was full. It was a packed Farbrengen. And you need to remember, you had 3 Hakafos, 3 times Hakafos, and this was already the second Farbrengen, Leil Simchas Torah, and now it's Yom Simchas Torah. And the Farbrengen went till midnight, and then when the Farbrengen was finished, oh, by the way, I just want to mention, amongst the things that the Rebbe always spoke about Simchas Torah by the Farbrengen, was number one, the Rebbe always spoke about Chitas, Chumash, Tilim, and Tanya. There were a few times a year they always spoke about Chitas. One of those times was Simchas Torah. Another thing the Rebbe spoke about was Keren Hashana. The Rebbe wanted to give tzedakah according to the days of the year. So you would give the Rebbe money according to the number of days of the year, and the Rebbe would give tzedakah for you every day, Keren Hashana. And the Rebbe always spoke about different things regularly on Simchas Torah, and they gave Kesha Bracha. Kesha Bracha can go on till 4 in the morning, forever, 3 hours, 2 hours, no problem. The Rebbe stood and gave anybody one. He looked you in the eyes, put L'chaim Levrach. Looked in your eyes, L'chaim Levrach. Looked you in the eyes, L'chaim Levrach. The girls didn't get Kesha Bracha, but anybody who wanted looked you in the eyes, L'chaim Levrach. Looked you in the eyes, L'chaim Levrach. Now, imagine Simchas Torah is Friday. Simchas Torah is Friday, okay? So, Shemini Atzeres was Thursday. So Wednesday night was Hakafos. Yeah? Thursday night was a Farbrengen till about midnight. Hakafos started 1 o'clock in the morning and went till 3 or 3:15. The next morning was Shachris till 2:30, from 10 o'clock till 2:30. That Friday afternoon, before the Shkia, the Rebbe came in and washed Neder Suda, Farbrengen, Matzah Simchas Torah. Now there's a halacha in Shulchan Aruch that once Shabbos comes in, you're not allowed to eat. Right? But there's an eitzah. The eitzah is called Peiras Mapa Makadosh. When the Shabbos comes in, you take a challah cover the challah, and you make Kiddush. It's called Peiras, and so what you do is you end up eating a meal. You can eat the meal Friday night before Ma'ariv. If you started a meal out of Shabbos, so when Shabbos comes in, you cover the challah, you make Kiddush, and then you continue eating till you bench, and after benching, you'll daven Ma'ariv. The Rebbe for many years asked people to be paid this Mapa Makadosh, but the Rebbe himself wouldn't do it. The Rebbe himself didn't do it, so somebody else would do it, and anybody who wanted was Yitzhak Kiddush. So the Rebbe would wash the beginning of the Farbrengen, say L'chaim till the Shkia, and then he wouldn't eat it all. He wouldn't eat it all. Anybody who wanted it, in later years, the Rebbe stopped it, and he started it. The Rebbe wasn't happy how they did it. Bottom line is, it seems like the Rebbe feels that we shouldn't do it anymore. No one should pay this Mapa Makadosh. But it's a halacha and Shulchan Aruch that if you start a meal on a Friday, like if it's Purim, let's say, and you're going into Shabbos, and you don't want to stop the meal, so you cover up the chal. It's a complicated halachas. You have to know how to do it. And you make Kiddush, and then there becomes a shaila. You have to make another hamaitzi or not, right? If you make Kiddush in the middle of a Suda, and after Kiddush, you want to eat more bread, you have to make another hamaitzi. I think the halacha is that you have to, but it's complicated. But the Rebbe never participated. But the Farbrengen didn't go late. I don't know, if it was Friday night, it went till 9, it didn't go till 12 o'clock. Then the Rebbe benched, didn't drink till a cup of wine, kept it. Daven Ma'ariv, went upstairs. The next day is Shabbos Breishis. The next day. Number one, 8:30 in the morning, Tilim. Now how tired are you after all of these Hakafos and Farbrengens and Talucha? You're exhausted. 8:30 Tilim. The Chazan Shabbos Breishis was Moshe Talashevsky, who was a beautiful Chazan, but the Ma'ariv took forever, and the Shachas took forever. So Shachas starts 10:30. Moshe Talashevsky finished Musaf 1:05. 1:30 the Rebbe came into another Farbrengen, and Farbrengen till almost 4 or 5 o'clock. And he gave, in some years, gave Kesha Bracha that he hadn't given the night before. And then before the Shkia, he came for a third Farbrengen. So if you had what's called a Rosh Hashanah Meshulish, the Simchas Torah Meshulish, you, in many years, you had 4 Farbrengens and 3 Hakafos. You were beyond tired when that situation was over. When you walked out, much as Shabbos Breishis, at 1 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the morning, after the end of Kesha Bracha, there was a Farbrengen Thursday night. There was a Farbrengen Friday night. There were 2 Farbrengens on Shabbos itself. One at 1:30 in the afternoon and one before the Shkia. When you walked out, Matzah Simchas Torah, after all of that, you were wrung out like a rag. Your suit, forget about cleaning it. It was when the guy, something to dry. It was a mess. But the upliftedness that you felt when it's hard to imagine this, but they used to sell T-shirts and mugs. I survived Tishrei in 770. In the late 80s, people made a business and people bought them t-shirts and mugs. I saw a man had a cap. It said, I survived paying for my daughter's trip to seminary in Israel. But they had mugs and t-shirts. I survived. It was unreal. When it was all over, you were exhausted, but you were exhilarated. You were elated. Now understand what the Rebbe did. The Rebbe stretched Tishrei 2 more weeks. 2 more weeks. Why? Because it says in Halacha that Zayin Cheshvan is 2 complete weeks after Simchas Torah. Simchas Torah is Chov Gimel Tishrei. Tishrei has 30 days. So from Chov Gimel to Lamed is a week. Aleph to Zayin, it's 14 days. The Rebbe stretched Tishrei till Zayin Cheshvan. He asked that since in Eretz Yisrael, people who traveled home would not say V'sein Talamata till Zayin Cheshvan because the last people came home, but they used to go by wagon or by horse. We go by plane. So if you leave 770 Zayin Cheshvan, you can be home on the same day. The Rebbe asked people to stay. Now who could afford to stay for 2 weeks after Simchas Torah? Who? The people have no jobs. Who have no jobs? Bachrim and girls. Everybody else has real work. And Zusha Vilamovsky. Most people have to go home. But till Zayin Cheshvan, the Rebbe was Simchas Torah. The mood, Yom Tov, you felt Sukkos from Yudalet Kislev, from Yom Kippur till Zayin. The Rebbe made Sukkos into a situation. It wasn't a week. He stretched it. And by the Rebbe, the mood was Yom Tovdik. He Farbrengen Pashas Neach. He Farbrengen Pashas Lech. Until Zayin Cheshvan was still the mood of Tishrei. The bima, they had a platform that the Rebbe was on. Or the platform the Rebbe stood on. Now that platform is there permanently. After the Rebbe and Chaim Mushka passed away, the Rebbe let them leave the platform permanently. But in years past, the Rebbe didn't like the platform. The Rebbe wanted to be on the same level as everybody else. The Rebbe felt, halachically, if you're on a platform, you're not part of the group. So the Rebbe had all kinds of rules how he wanted the platform to be. People should stand together with him on the platform. But the rule was the platform went up Erev Rosh Hashanah and came down Matzah Simchas Torah. And there was no such thing as being late by the Rebbe. The day Simchas Torah, the platform disappeared. The Rebbe did not like the platform. He reluctant to agree to it. When the Rebbe started speaking Zayin Cheshvan, the platform stayed 2 more weeks. Till Lech Lecha, the platform was still Tishrei. And after Zayin Cheshvan, the platform went away, and then the Rebbe didn't Farbrengen for a few Shabbos, and you sort of felt that Tishrei would pass. The Rebbe Pashat extended the Yom Tov, the mood of Simcha until Zayin Cheshvan. And of course you all know there are 2 expressions that go along with the end of Tishrei that you know. The first one is V'Yakov Holach L'Darkei, and the second is Fanan de Pak and the Pek. Yayin Hochdach means you go home. The Rebbe used to say that in Lubavitch, on Matzah Simchas Torah, they would bang on the bimah and they would announce V'Yayin Holach L'Darkei, you go home. But that's only the first half. Then you come home and you have to do inventory. Chedesh Hashvi, Muspa Bakel, you collected all kinds of good things during the Yom Tov, especially if you were by the Rebbe. For another pack, and the pack means unpack what you acquired, what you bought in the market. So these are 2 expressions that the Rebbe would use. You leave 770, you leave the Rebbe, and you go back to your place of shlichus, wherever you live, and you bring with you what you took by the Rebbe. And when you get home, there's a separate process of taking inventory, unpacking. Another pack in the back to take apart what it is that you collected in the time that you spent by the Rebbe. That was how the Rebbe would describe it. And of course, there's the famous letter, which I'm sure you know about, that in Tashma Malef, which was Hakel, 42 years ago, was very cold, like it is this year. And everyone got cold. 770 was full, it was packed. Everyone had the sniffles. Everyone was cold. Zalman Jaffe, who was a very close Chosson of the Rebbe's, but he also talked to the Rebbe like a normal person, wrote a letter at the end of Tishrei describing and thanking the Rebbe for Tishrei, how wonderful it was, so nice to be with the Rebbe, but he wrote in his letter that it's a pity everyone got a cold. So the Rebbe wrote back a letter with a long P.S. And the P.S. begins, you wrote in your letter that people came to be with me for Yom Tov, and they went away cold. And the Rebbe writes, I know this is not what you meant, but everything is ba'ashgacha pratis. People come here to warm up, not to become cold. Remember a whole letter. When you go away from the Rebbe, every year, Sukkot time, that letter rolls around on the WhatsApps. You go away from the Rebbe, you come away ungewartet. And that was the truth. The Rebbe lifted us all up and lifts us all up. And he gave us a good Yom Tov. Okay, Haslach Adik Yom Kippurim and Achsim and Agmar Chasim.